want to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for coming out tonight to celebrate with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. As you know, 2018 is our 10-year anniversary, and that's a real significant thing to celebrate because when we were launched in 2008 at the Open Society Foundations, we were only supposed to be a 3-year campaign. And we are here today because of the themes that we're hearing about tonight, about power and leveraging power and seeing your own power. I will tell you that for the first 4 months, when I was leading the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, the voice in my head was saying, who are you to be leading a campaign for Black Male Achievement? And God said, who are you not to be leading the campaign for Black Male Achievement? We're here because of purpose, and we're here because of resilience. So let's give a round of applause to those amazing speakers that we heard tonight. And without further ado, we are going to have a panel. I hate to call it a panel, right? We're just going to sit down and we're going to kick it for a little bit, right? But the theme that you heard is that there's power in story. And the Campaign for Black Male Achievement has forever been committed to uplifting the stories, not only of black men, but black women, our community. One of our mantras is that we have to become the masters of our own media, take control of our own stories. And so tonight, after the panel and after an amazing rendition that we are going to hear, we're doing a raffle. How many people got their raffle tickets and they heard about the story? Because you have this power in your story too. And we're going to pick 3 people that were so bold to say, yes, I want to step up. And we're going to have a brief storytelling, I'm not going to call it a competition, exhibition. And there are 3 cash prizes. I'll tell you how this is going to work, just in case you didn't hear how it's going to work. You come up, you got 5 minutes to tell your story. It's only going to be 3 of you. And the 3 authors are going to judge first place, second place, third place. First place will walk out of here with $250. Second place will walk out of here with $150. And third place with $100. So not only does your story have power, your story got some money behind it if you're willing to step up. So I want to welcome these 3 brothers who I love dearly, and they have entered my lives in different ways, and I just sat there and marveled at their stories. I want to first ask Jim St. Germain to come out, then Quentin Vennie, and then Richard Taylor. We're going to have a seat, and we're just going to have a conversation, and then we're going to have some Q&A. Weren't they fabulous? And Steve, you're the timer, so I'll make sure not to look at you, right? Oh, where's my mic? Oh, Saladin, you put my mic under my shirt. Where is it? Oh, man. All right, so thank you, Saladin. So they can't find my mic. It's in my underwear now. All right. Got to be flexible here. Okay. I thought it was my hearing. I said, I can't hear myself. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your courage. And I'm just so inspired by each and every one of you. And and we heard this, and Richard, you talked a lot about power in your story. And the theme tonight is Black Millennial memoirs, right? You've all have produced memoirs and transformative stories of power, purpose, and resilience. What I would love to hear from each of you when we talk about power, because when you all buy their books or get their books, they've all had moments of powerlessness in their lives, and you heard that. And what I want to hear is about that transformation when each of you crossed over from that place of powerlessness, discovered that your story has power. And what was that like? And how do you continue to use that? You know, we'll start right here with you, Jim.
Sure. For me, it kind of took place a little bit later on than I expected or wanted. I was about 17. I was at the Boys Town program and had received a phone call from my grandmother who told me that my dad was just hospitalized and that I need to get to the hospital because he wasn't going to make it. And when I went to the hospital to see him, he was just connected to all these wires and tubes, and I had seen him in bad shape before this, but this time was different. I thought that was it for him, even though we didn't have such a great relationship because my dad was dealing with his own demons in life. But nonetheless, he was still my father, and one of the things I've always appreciated about him was that regardless of how bad things were, he was always there. At least physically was there. So when I got that call, I figured that I needed to change something. This was a sign that I needed to do something different. But the other thing was I started to think back to the time before I came to the States. While I was in Haiti, I remember leaving, and a lot of the elders from the little community where I grew up would come up to me and say, hey, you know, we're counting on you. And what that means in Haiti is that we're literally depending on you to put the next meal on the table. And so when I thought about that moment and my dad about to die, I kind of felt like this was the time, like I needed to take that next step and pivot over. So that thing was just a responsibility, and sometimes it can be a really good burden. And it just happened that I was at the space and place and time where I was able to utilize everything around me to make that change. Because sometimes in life you're ready to take the next step, but you may not be in the right environment. And there are times where you actually have to remove yourself to put yourself in a different environment in order for you to flourish. So that's kind of how it happened for me.
How about you, Quentin?
I think for me, I was a bit of a late bloomer. I didn't find value in myself until I turned 30. I had some pretty significant experiences. I sold heroin. I was shot at. I've been in a lot of unfortunate situations. But I've never been so obsessed with life. So I kind of lived a life of fearlessness. I lived a life with an expectation of not coming home that night or the next day. So when I went through my addiction, I feel like that was my lowest point because I'd always promised myself that I wouldn't be my father. I promised myself that I'd be a better father to my children than I had myself. And then I feel like I became an addict by accident. I was growing up, we're told that the drug dealers you're supposed to look out for look like you and I. They wear the hoodies and the Timberland boots and they look like members from Wu-Tang. They never told me that they could be guys in white lab coats with prescription slips and the ability to literally alter and change the trajectory of your entire life. So I wanted to make that guy out to be a liar and subsequently make everyone else who projected what my life would be to be out, to be liars. So in a lot of ways, it was kind of me being petty, but it was in that pettiness that I found purpose. And once I realized that my life had value and that it had purpose, I made it my mission to ensure other people would find the same thing.
Powerful. Richard.
Yeah, so I think that for me, man, power came in levels, like in just different spaces. So after my final suicide attempt, I was living in a double as a single. This was like my sophomore year, or junior year of college. And I had this mirror that sat on the door, and I would I would look into the mirror. So I had to go see the school psychologist, and of course, you know, they give all of these like ideas on what you can do and their best practices. So I went home one day just randomly on some me stuff, and I'm looking at this mirror, and I start just speaking positive words of affirmation, but it was really just speaking like positivity towards every broken area of myself. And I didn't believe it when I was first doing it. I just was doing it. But it's amazing, like I said, the stories have power, but our words do too. So it's amazing just how you can say something for so long that I think mentally you'll start challenging yourself on what you're saying. And so for me, it kind of was like the shift was there. And what I found interesting was that even though I wanted to die, I lacked vision, but I knew that there was a greater purpose. And so that was the first part. And I think as time went on, you know, I lost 170 pounds, and, you know, I made bad decisions in doing it. I developed bulimia for a long time. The second part of finding power, I think, is a continual process even now as we go through. You talked about the environments.
Yeah.
So environment is one piece, and then I think just divine alignment is another too, right? Like being connected to the right mentors, the right people. My life changed forever when I got married last year. Like, I mean, literally that shift of having someone there to not only hold you accountable, but
You
then
can clap for that. I don't
yeah,
know if
like
that's
for real, like no, and that's so real.
I don't know if that's his wife clapping, but yeah, we.
Specifically, as you talk about black men, I think that's so important for us, man, to have, you know, I know we always say our help meet, but like I found that in that space now, I find more power because of the fact that I am connected with my forever, and now it's heightened my purpose, and I know where I need to be and what I need to do. And so for me, it's like changed my perspective. So even on those low days, right, because we still have them, like every day is not a good day. Some days you just want to just throw the whole day away, throw it all away. And I think in those moments, man, it's kind of going back to having that understanding of, yo, you overcame so much more than this. You're facing the same thing. It's wearing a different face now. But if you conquered it once, you can conquer it again.
And yes, you can clap. So, each of you in your books, in your story, you reveal a level of vulnerability, finding strength in your broken places. And so many of us grow up with this sense of false masculinity that we have to grit our teeth and clench our fists and don't let anybody know that we're hurting, right? And I've been saying, like, vulnerability is the new sexy, right? Y'all some sexy brothers, right?
Pretty sexy.
What, thank you. But could you just talk about overcoming that sense of false masculinity to get to the point, because sometimes we have to come to our most painful moment, ask for help in order to discover the purpose, right? Because we hear your stories, all three of you could easily not be here right now. And how did you deal with and overcome that voice that told you, just, you know, keep it cool, don't say nothing, you're a man, you don't need help, you can do this by yourself? Start with you, Quentin.
I love that question. I guess for me, people always say it takes some, what is it? Like you got to see a man to be a man. The example of a man that I saw was not the man I wanted to be. I was brought up to believe that I did have to grin and bear it, that I wasn't allowed to have feelings, I wasn't allowed to have emotions, and the only emotion I was allowed to have was anger. And even with that, it came with a list of contingencies. So my entire life, you know, I was void of feeling. And when you go through a process of being addicted to something, you have no choice but to feel in some capacity. Because the whole reason why you're addicted is because you're chasing numbness. You're afraid of feeling. But it was in that addiction that I felt the most separated from who I was. I often say that, and I guess for me it was really having children and having 2 boys, because I didn't have a mentor until I was 30 plus. I didn't have anyone to look up to and say, I'm going to aspire to be you. I watched Family Matters and The Cosby Show and lived vicariously through that, So I believe now that vulnerability is not just the new sexy, but vulnerability is ultimate strength. And it takes a real man or human being to be honest and honest enough to accept and expose that vulnerability. Looking at what we believe, I'm sorry, I'm 5'7", so I'm trying to get comfortable, but I want to keep my feet on the ground. So I'm just going to sit up a little bit. These guys are like 6 foot plus. I'm having a difficult time here. Like I said, vulnerability is ultimate strength, and I'm not one of those guys that believes I need to smoke Marlboro Reds and chop wood and hunt the ox, and I'm not that guy. I go with my girlfriend and we get manicures and pedicures and massages, they can't have all the fun, right? But I take care of my kids. I come home every day. I break my neck to make sure they have more than I did. So I don't care if I sit on this stage and I cry. I don't care if I sit on this stage and I shout. I catch the Holy Ghost, the Spirit. I don't care what I do. There's nothing more masculine to me than taking care of your responsibilities.
So I will say one of the highlights of tonight for me was when Callow introduced you and said your name. I don't know which son it was, but one of your sons was like, yeah. And that was you, right? And that sense of like, that's my daddy. I'm proud of my daddy. Just like it warmed me, right? And so sometimes we have to have examples of what we don't want to be like, because so many brothers in my generation did not grow up with their father and had to go out and find the role models and the ways to navigate the world. Richard, you wanted the issue of masculinity and all that you had to do to overcome, the forced norms.
Truthfully, I just got tired. Like, you get to a point in life where you just can't bear the weight anymore. Like, I was just tired. I was like, the facade put me in this space once before. Like, I just can't keep doing it to myself. Otherwise, I'm going to keep up this repetitive cycle. Like, this is just going to be a life-sucking abyss for forever. And so I got tired. And, man, for me, it's funny you mentioned catching the Holy Ghost. And so...
you caught the Holy Ghost earlier.
Well, it's funny, so we talk about, different characters, right? Not all heroes wear capes, all right? But when you look at, contextually, when you look at David, right? They talk about David being this warrior in the Bible, but David was also this dude who had no fear or shame and crying out. And I read the story, and not even from a biblical context, but just I always remember this dude being the guy who took a rock, knocked Goliath out, sliced his head up. I'm thinking 300 Leonidas when I see this stuff. So in my mind, I'm and he still cried? Because that's always been me, being able to understand that I can't hold this weight anymore. And I don't want to. But then also having the realization that I don't have to. Because for so long I had lived my life through the lens and scope of everybody else. And I realized that at the end of the day, they're not going to sleep with Richard's thoughts, feelings, and everything else. Richard does. And so for me, it was just a matter of being tired. I was worn out. And you always talk about the cavalry's not coming, the cavalry is here. And I feel like that's one prime example of it, is literally turning your back. So I use that term starve the beast in some of my books, but it was literally turning my back on the very thing that kept me bound for so long. I have no contractual agreement to you. All I have to do is just walk away. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate things, but for me, it was just one of those things where I was I opened the doorway for this. I allowed you in and I relinquished my power, but now it's time for me to take it back and get up out of here. And that's what it was.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Jim.
Well, I think that as all of us on the stage and many in the audience understand why the bravado and machismo in our sort of like community sometime is needed. As a young man, you couldn't show how soft and how weak you were. Everything was, and every day was about surviving.
Yeah.
And again, your ability to show that you weren't soft or you weren't a punk, which then is really truly depriving you of just your humanity, was what, it was like it kept you protected in a sense. And so I think that level of masculinity have actually killed more of us than we like to admit. I think back to my youth, there are so many things that happened, and it wasn't the act that actually caused us to react the way we did. It was simply because we knew other people were watching, and we couldn't allow that to just occur, right? Because I remember as a young man, when I first got in trouble with the law, and all of the dudes in my neighborhood would say to me, look, man, as soon as you get in there, the first person that look at you, just punch them in the face. And what they were telling me was that as soon as you do that, you'll send a message to everyone else, right? So it wasn't the right strategy. It wasn't healthy for me, but it was what we used to protect us. And so for me, I got to a point where it was just costing me too much. It cost me a lot. It cost a lot of my friends a lot. I mean, I've literally lost countless friends to the streets. A lot of them I can name. And they were dead by the age of 18, some of them 21. And so I got to a point where I realized that, man, you're going to have to actually be vulnerable and let certain things go. And I also understood that I wanted to control my own narrative and my own story. And there's a phrase that says, who angers you, control you. So I wanted to change that. I wanted to have ownership. And then I realized that if I'm vulnerable, then no one can use that against me, right? So now I'm at a point in my life where people would bump into me and I'd be the first one saying sorry, right? Yes, the other day I walked into Barnes & Noble. I had a book signing there. And the lady said, oh, you Jim? I said, yeah. She said, wow, you look so soft and tender. She literally said that to me. She said, I didn't expect you to look like this after reading your book. I was like, well, miss, I've always been soft and tender. It's just that I couldn't show it where I grew up. And, growing up without a mother for me has left a really profound hole in my chest even till this day. So a part of me never even learned how to show emotion like that. I remember the first time this guy told me he loved me, Walton. I kid you not, we were leaving and he said, big son, I love you. And I felt weird. I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? Where I'm from, men don't tell other men they love them. But it was profound for me. And I didn't say it back to him at the moment, but he kept on saying it to me. And now it's like, every time I see him, I'm like, I love you. I don't hang up the phone with my son until we tell each other we love him. So I think that's kind of transformation we needed to go through as a process to get to where we're at today.
So thank you. I got a bunch of other questions, but I can ask you guys questions all the time. I know how to reach you. We're going to see if there are any questions from the audience. And Steve, I'm going to ask if you can do your best Montel Williams impersonation. I was going to give you this mic. We can just take the mic and go around. Is there anyone that has a question? Okay, Steve, we have over here. Oh, we got a bunch of.
Good.
Hey. All right, let's start.
Your son is going to be a rock star.
I just want to, first of all, give God the praise, the thanks, and the glory, and to congratulate you, Brother Shawn Dove, and these absolutely phenomenal authors. Absolutely. Marcus Garvey, Paul Robeson, Adam Clayton Powell, Elijah Farrakhan, Jesse, everybody in the house, including the Temptations, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Delphonics, Blue Magic, and all of the music from Berry Gordy and Gamble and Huff and the OJs back in the day. I've been crying up a storm, and when I just want to ask one question, As a father of 4, you touched me. All of you. You made me cry. And I've had to navigate as a Harlemite, someone who graduated from Harlem Prep just 1973, just 10 blocks up. My son's on that stage. My eldest son graduated from Duke University with a degree in math. My second son from Yale, biology and chemistry. And my twin daughters at Howard University Medical School. That was a struggle. I know the father piece. You know, the love, the tenderness, the peace. Shawn, congratulations for 10 years. I thank you. I got one question. I thank you, my brother, for 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago when you ran the mentoring program and you put me on your program on a number of occasions. And I thank you, and I thank you, I thank you.
Thank you, brother.
I thank you.
Steve, I was going to warn you when I saw that was Dennis Raheem, that you were giving the mic to, I was like, you ain't going to get it back. Love you, brother.
Love you back.
We have Steve over
Excellent.
here.
So before we go over there,
Thank you. I know what you're about to say. Go ahead.
Come on, Steve.
a question. That is a sentence that ends in a question mark. With the love, I'm going to hold the mic. Please stand, brother. I'm going to hold it, get your question, and pop off.
I'm Eliseo Rosario, a former Lower East Sider, Puerto Rican, born and raised. One of the struggles I had as I was climbing through my story was that the closer I got to my destination, the further I got from the folks that I knew, and they turned on me. What I call it is the lobster effect. They pull you down as you're trying to climb up. I was wondering whether you guys have had that experience.
Good question.
Thank you. I loved how you did that quickly and ended it in a question, brother. Question. Brothers,
Want me to start?
really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we back home in Baltimore, we call it the crab in the barrel effect. I moved to New Jersey. It'll be 5 years this year. And even going back, I might still go to my old neighborhood, and some of the love is still the same, but I've had to reevaluate my priorities. I'm a firm believer in the idea that you are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. And had I not changed my environment, I probably would not be here today. So yes, a lot of people walked away from me, and I'm blessed and fortunate that they did.
That was a question, and that was a response. Yes, brother.
I would say that I've been fortunate enough where I didn't have to deal with guys trying to pull me back down. Some of the challenges I've had, actually, there are times where because I love all of the individuals I grew up with and still do love them and want all of us to rise, I would actually put myself in situations sometimes where instead of decreasing the margin for error, I would increase it. I remember one incident where it was just a shooting on the block, coming from work late night, see my homies in front of the liquor store, and I stopped to say, "What's up?" Cops jumped out, guns out, get on the wall, and I'm in the bookings for 2 days. And what I learned from that night was, look, you can love them, but if they're not trying to get to where you're trying to get to at the moment, you're going to have to love them from across the street. So I started waving like a politician when I see them, but I still love them, and hoping that they would learn from how I move and how I conduct myself.